Hey there, welcome back YouTube fam. It's Pete here. Today we're back in the shop and we're going to be taking a look at my new mountain bike. For those of you who were with us in the last video, I told you I was going to give us a full breakdown of my build, the geometry and all that. And we're also going to go through the part spec on there so you guys have an idea of what I'm riding. Go ahead and get into the geometry of this bike, kind of talk about why I built it the way that I did. Since I'm not an enduro rider, I don't see myself coming off 5-6 foot drops all the time. Most of our long descents here in the Canal Valley are probably less, like a quarter mile or less. So we don't have any real big descending to do, and I don't need a downhill bike in this valley. I've got a lot of cross-country trails, a lot of switchbacks to climb, rocks to avoid. So I want a nimble bike that's going to be able to handle those things and still be able to climb back to the top because I got to do a lot of climbing here. There's no uplifts, there's no shuttle runs, it's all pedal to the top. With that being said, I've got a 120 millimeter fork on my bike. I don't feel like I need a ton of suspension because it's not enduro, it's just cross country. But our trails are pretty aggressive in some places and I do need the relief on my old man body. So I don't want a super racy cross country bike, I just want something durable and able to take a bump if I do come off a 4 to 6 foot drop. I'm not going to have to worry too much about that with the fork I have on my bike. So first off, we're going to tell you that the geometry on this bike is pretty cross-country. I've got a 68-degree head tube angle on there because I got a lot of switchbacks, lots of climbing. I want to be able to control my bike even at low speed, so I don't need to be raked out at 64 degrees. Ooh! I've got a downhill bike. When I want to do that stuff, I'll go with the 63 degrees on my downhill bike. But for just riding around the Charleston area and most of the trails we just have in the state here, going with the more mellow or a slightly steeper head tube angle is going to give me a little more control in some of those areas. So the reach on this bike is 426 millimeters, and I went with a shorter reach because I have longer legs and a shorter torso, and I found on a lot of large bikes I'm just stretched out, and a lot of mediums I'm real compact. So I just kind of found a happy medium in those 2 points, and it seems like the 426 works out pretty well for me. It was on one of the last bikes I used, and it works out pretty well. We got a 440 millimeter seat tube on here. Once again, I got those long legs, so I needed to take up that extra space. Seat tube angle is at 73, or was it 72 degrees? So it's going to keep the tire planted on the ground. Went ahead and used some short seat stays on there at 427 millimeters. Got the back wheel pushed up as far as I could with the 27 by 2.8 tire clearance. And with that, I just like to jump around and whip the bike around, so if I'm wanting to do kickouts or whatever kind of whips with the bike, that back end's going to be nice and nimble. If I want a bunny hop, it's going to pop right up when I want it to. It's not going to be a slug way out there behind me. With the 44 millimeter bottom bracket drop I put on there, that's going to bring us to about a 321 millimeter bottom bracket height. And that might seem kind of high to a lot of you all, but with all the baby head rocks and just chunks on the trail, I want to have some clearance to get over things. I've got a lot of friends who are riding enduro bikes recently, and they're all complaining about pedal strikes and just the trouble they're having with that. And one more thing, this bike is not built on boost spacing on the rear. We've got the 142, the wheels that I had, I just kind of built the bike around that because I don't plan on changing them. And yeah, so I've got 142 spacing on the rear and still have clearance for that 27 by 2.8 tire. This bike is built with a 31/8 seat tube and routing for an internal dropper. All of the cable routing on this bike is external and I love it. I know a lot of people are like, oh, it looks terrible, blah, blah, blah. Y'all don't work on bikes. I do. When I have a trouble, I can just clip, take the wire off, throw a new one on. It's way easier for the mechanic to work on the bike. The only cable that is internal is the dropper post, and it just goes in right into the frame right there at the bottom, so I can have a stealth dropper, and that opens up your availability to better dropper posts. And now that we're done with the geometry on this bike, let's go ahead and get into the parts spec. And for that cross-country build, I do like to ride pretty aggressively, so it's not the lightest stuff that I put on there in some cases. I've got profile racing helm stem and a 50 millimeter reach. I've got spoon spank handlebars. They are 760 mil bars. I don't have super wide shoulders, so I don't need super wide bars. Most of the trails we have around here aren't super steep, so I don't need a raked out enduro ride with bars out here. I'm just going to ride something that's good for the trails that we have around here. Then on the controls, we've got the wolf tooth dropper for the seat post. That thing is perfect. I know it might seem like overkill to spend that kind of money on a dropper lever, just for something you just push it with your hand. But I've seen a lot of the cheaper levers out there. They fail pretty quickly. They feel flimsy. You got to really mash them to get some activation. But with this wolf tooth, I just push it in, and my Crank Brothers seat post works the way it should. Got Magura MT5 brakes on the bike. Brakes are pretty good. I didn't like them at first. I had to upgrade a few things on there, changed out to metal brake pads, had to put the metallics on there, swapped out the rotors, went with 180 rotors. I was having really bad performance with the Magura rotors that they recommend for this, and I don't know if I just got a bad set of pads that came with the brakes, but I just took it all off there and went ahead and upgraded everything so I wouldn't have to worry about it. And now, nice 2-finger braking, no problem. I've got Box's Prime 9 drivetrain on there. We went with the Box 2 setup, and that's given me a middle-of-the-road drivetrain. I've got an 11 to 50 cassette with a 32-tooth chainring up front. There's not any hills that I run into that I can't pedal up. And there's often times where I just feel like that 50-tooth is just a little too much. But every once in a while, I'm glad I have it. Everything in between is right where I need it to be. I don't notice that I don't have every little increment between the gears. And when my derailleur hanger gets knocked a little bit, my bike still shifts gears just like it should. So I'm pretty stoked on that 9-speed drivetrain. I've got a Sram Sx Crank on the bike. I'm going to up that to a profile racing crank later on, but for now, the budget dictates we're sticking with some of the parts that came off the last bike. The SX Crank does its job. It's not too heavy, but it's definitely not the lightest crank out there. On the dub spindle, dub, it's whatever. It's another marketing thing that SRAM did, but it's stiff and it does the job. I've got a BSA 30 bottom bracket on here and the SRAM dub threaded bottom bracket. It works great for now. Tiny bearing, so it's not going to hold up for too long. By the time that gets shot, we're going to have that profile racing crank in there. And for suspension on this bike, I went with the Suntour Radeon 34. I know a lot of people aren't into Suntour products, and that's kind of one of the reasons that I put this fork on my bike. The Radeon 34 is an air fork with a hydraulic rebound and lockout. You can adjust the compression and lock it out. You've got a rebound adjustment so you can tune in how quickly it responds to the original position that you were at, depending on the type of terrain you're riding. If you're riding chattery, bumpy stuff, you want that responding and acting quickly. If you're jumping and hitting big stuff, you want to slow it down a little bit so it's not shooking down real fast and pulling the front end of your bike down. You can change those kind of things and really get it dialed in to the way that you ride. It's a very stiff fork with those 34mm stanchions and the boost spacing. The 15mm axle up front really does just point the bike where you want to go. It's so weird getting used to how supple the fork is in its small bump compliance and how stiff it is at the same time. When you turn the handlebars and lean into it, it goes where you want, but it will just compress and do what it needs to do. One more thing about these Suntour forks, I know a lot of people dislike the quick release on there, and that's because you haven't read the owner's manual. When I first got it, I was frustrated with it because it just always tried to push it in. You had to push it and try and pull, and it wouldn't work. With these quick releases, they are awesome once you learn how to use them. Just open the lever, push in on the little dial, rotate it about 1/8 to 1/4 of a turn, and it will stay in. Then you slide it out, no problem. Pull your wheel out, do everything you need to do, put it back in, and then once you've pulled the quick release all the way through, just turn that top knob again, and it'll pop right out, close the quick release, and it is locked in there. For the seat post on this bike, we have a Crank Brothers Highline 2 with 150mm of drop. It is a pretty decent seat post. It's not the lightest thing out there, but once again, I'm not a weight weenie, and I don't really need to worry about that. I want a bike that's going to hold up and do what I want. And time after time, when I push that button, this seat goes up and down just like it should. I've got some generic grips on my bike. They came on something. I don't know where I got them, but they feel like pistol grips, the old ATI pistol grips, and I really like those, so I'm just keeping those on there until they're worn out. And then I've just got a Bontrager saddle, some kind of Select or something that came out of the parts bin because I like the way they feel. The one place that I did try to save a little bit of weight on this bike was the wheel set. We went with the Eclipse carbon rims on their DB729 wheel set, and those are stocked with Novatech hubs. Pretty decent engagement on the rear, but we've got a 29 internal millimeter width and a 35 external width to help support those wider tires. Since I am running a 2.6 and I eventually want to run a 2.8, I wanted to get the beefiest rims in there that I could, but I didn't want to add a ton of weight to the bike, so we went with carbon fiber to help cut the weight down on that. And since I am running carbon fiber wheels, I have a Tannis insert in the rear. I know a lot of people are using different branded inserts, having tried Cushcore, Tannis, and some of the other things out there. I kind of feel like Tannis gives me a little more sidewall support. Yeah, it's a lot less expensive, but that's just a bonus. It gives you more sidewall support and actual more protection to the rim. So if you actually do end up riding flat and you have to pedal out of the woods, the Tannis is going to hold up a little bit better for you while you're out there. The tires on the bike are the Schwalbe Hans Damp. They're more of a cross-country tire. They're very big knobs, so when things get wet, they stick right in. When you're riding in some of the loose gravel chunk, it's probably not the best for that really dry, dusty stuff, but we don't get a lot of that here in West Virginia, so these tires are working well for me. Once I wear them out, I am going to put on some 2.8s. There were just no 2.8s available when I built out this bike. And I can't really think of anything else to tell you about my rad bike other than it was designed by me. It's very similar to the Soma Riff, but just a little bit more aggressive, and no adjustable dropouts because there's no reason to have that extra fatigue point on the bike. With sliding dropouts, you push them to the back, you're increasing leverage, you've got all those little bolts going in. It may make the bike more versatile, but if you know what you want, you don't need all that versatility. I know what I want, and I don't. If you've got one of these Marinos, be sure to drop a line down in the comments below and let us know how you like your bike. If you're thinking of building one up, let us know what you're thinking about. Be sure to give us a like and a subscribe if you haven't already. All the likes really do help out, and I'm trying to grow this channel. As you'll notice, we're just under 750 subscribers today, and I would really like to get to 1,000. So please help us out. Give us that subscribe. I'm going to have some more videos coming out real soon, documenting a couple of other cool bikes coming out. Not mine, but they are bikes I know you all will be interested in. So be sure to come back for the rest of the rad videos coming out here on my channel.